Let's do chapter 28, number 7. Since the beginning of this century, there has been a significant increase in the price of corn-based ethanol. That's a true story. A key input to the production of corn-based ethanol is corn. Use an appropriate diagram to explain what has likely occurred in the market for corn. I believe 2008, I could be wrong about the exact year, but it was around 2008 was the first time in the history of the world that food prices increased. And one person I heard at the time described it rather succinctly. It's because we were burning food in our automobiles. And that's a reference to ethanol production. So we face trade-offs. Of course, we do that to reduce our dependence on oil by cutting the amount of oil in our gas by 10% by making E10, but not without consequences. An interesting thing, I'll use this to segue to the next chapter just a little bit, is how that affects people of different incomes. Rising food prices for the first time in the history of the world. Who do you suppose that impacts more? Poor people or rich people? That's the next chapter. You got to look forward to that. So, what do we think here about the market for corn? If I can get my marker right. Well, if this was the supply of corn, the demand for corn, the price for corn, and how much corn was being bought and sold before ethanol became required by law in the United States, and also the manufacture of ethanol from corn was subsidized. I don't know if it still is or not. That increased demand for corn to use it in a new way, other than just for food, but for fuel. And the result of that would be higher prices of corn and more corn. The quantity supplied of corn is going to increase, so more corn will be bought and sold. And that has happened. But there are rippling consequences for that. Not part of this question I want to point out is, as corn crops have yielded higher prices, a lot of farmers have switched from other grains to corn. That's decreased the supply of other grains and pushed up their prices. That's why food prices across the board, or on average, I guess I should say, have risen due to the shift over to ethanol. Because of there's only so much agricultural land for the most part, and that's been shifted to corn production. Some agricultural land that was not in corn production was in ag preservation. No, I'm sorry, not ag preservation. Set aside is what we call it on the East Coast. They have another name for it. They name it after, they use a, set aside as a general term. In the Midwest, they use a different term for the name of the program where they're paid to not produce as a leftover of the Dust Bowl and at the period of time of the Great Depression. I was told by a farmer or rancher in the Midwest when this was happening in the mid-2000s, 2008, 2010 rather, that era, that they were pulling land that had been fallow for the purpose of just having ground cover into production. And that was a little disturbing at the time because it was fallow for a reason, to reduce wind erosion of the Midwest. And so we were ceasing to do that as a country due to these higher corn prices. Just an aside. Another aside, another rippling effect. That's not the one he asked for, but I don't know what MyLab's going to ask you. They might ask you something like that. The second part isn't about other grains. It's about snack foods. Here we go. In light of your answer to part A, explain why many hog farmers, who in the past used corn as the main feed input in hog production, have switched to cookies, licorice, cheese curls, candy bars, and other human snack foods instead of corn as food for the hogs. Seems to me that an easier substitute for corn is soybeans, but as I said, soybean prices have been up, so maybe there's something to this. We don't even have to model the market. If corn prices are higher and these things are substitutes to feed hogs, what this means is they have switched over to these substitutes because of the higher priced corn. Of course, originally they were more expensive, but corn has become higher than they are, so they're switching to the next alternative. And that, by the way, is increasing demand for those things and pushing up on those prices. So it's a substitute in the production of hogs. Those snack foods that were listed in B and corn are substitutes for one another, so that's increased demand for those things. So I hope that has thoroughly answered number 7 and a whole lot more.